Hello, this is Dr. Jamie Mathias, Executive Director of MASBA, the Mexican American School Boards Association. We're excited. This year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, our Golden Jubilee. MASBA was founded in 1970 on the heels of the Civil Rights Movement, so we are excited to be celebrating 50 years of closing gaps in our Texas public schools. Today we have a special webinar on the U.S. Census. We all know that as a nation, we're preparing to get a count of all who reside in our land. We're excited today to be able to welcome one who has several years of experience in education, over 25 years of experience. She graduated with her Master of Social Work from the University of Texas here in Austin. She now works with Title I schools in the Austin ISD, helping to coordinate the work of parent support specialists and all who are in direct contact with our families. Please join me in welcoming our presenter today, Leonor Vargas. Welcome, Leonor.
Thank you, Dr. Mathias, for the warm welcome and inviting me to speak on a very important topic right now, Latinos in the 2020 census. And when we first talked about me doing this presentation, what immediately came to mind was the notion of, will we count? I don't know how many of y'all know that, Latinos are one of the groups that is less responded in 2010, the last time the census was done. So I look forward to it. I will be providing an overview and on the census and what it is and why it's important. So I will start my presentation. As most of you know, the census is done every 10 years. The census is a count of every person in the United States, and different people call it different words. We call it here in town just count. It is mandated by the Constitution, and everyone is required to participate no matter their age, race, ethnicity, or immigration status. So here in Austin, we've been working with various partners, trying to get the information out to the diverse communities in their district, and especially right now with the COVID-19 crisis that we are faced, more than ever, it is very important that all of us be aware and we are all counted. A lot of our communities receive federal funds to basically support when things are happening like we are faced with right now. In the news, you have probably seen that we're much needed funds for hospitals, healthcare, and other vital social services. What we want to do is make sure that dollars we need to recover from this crisis and for the next decade, they will be there for us. My hope is that I will provide all the listeners some information. And as I mentioned, the goal is to make sure everyone is counted in once and that we do it in the right place. Because of this COVID-19, we are moving more to a digital platform right now and promoting the census. Right now, Texas alone, we're looking at $60 billion in resources to be allocated to Texas annually. And as I stated, these determines where services should be built, like schools, hospital, roads. But more importantly, it does fund some federal programs like Head Start, CHIP, Medicaid, and WIC, and which a lot of our families, Latino families, rely on. There's also political representation. In Texas has the opportunity to gain 2 to 3 congressional seats and redraw the electoral districts within our state, which is, does impact how we as Latinos or Latinas will be represented. As I stated, it does fund some programs. Here are the top programs that are federally funded. More than 1.5 trillion, in 2017 was distributed. Most of our families, and from a school's perspective, we look a lot at, how do we help with the nutritional assistance program? That is big right now. The student health program as well, the housing vouchers are here in our district right now. We are using some of those federal funds to make sure that our students and families are receiving meals right now twice a day at least. So this is a good example of why we need to complete the census. The count has improved.
If we could just
Yeah.
pause right there, Leonora, I hadn't seen those numbers before. That's over $1 trillion of federal monies that are distributed based on the U.S. Census then.
Yes, sir. That is exactly correct. And the information was pulled, as you can count, from the rural distribution funds. It does have a big impact for everyone that responds. It does impact, and part of this is educating our families. It is just not about the impact it has them responding and investing in the future of their families and for the next 2 years, their students.
Wow. So really appreciate that, Leonora. Certainly we're all aware of how it affects congressional seats, but to see those numbers adding up to more than $1.5 trillion, just really appreciate your bringing our attention to that.
You're welcome. And the count, as I mentioned, approximately 25% of Texas' current population live in hard-to-count areas. 1% are undercounted in Texas. That's 300 million federal funds annually. And here, as you can see, it's African American, Latinos, people of color, and Indians, and low-income household, and immigrants with English proficiency that are normally don't respond to the census, and our farm workers as well. And the most undercounted individuals are youth. Last time the census was done, we missed about 2.2 million very young children. You double that count, 1.2 million, for a net undercount of 1 million children. And approximately 400,000 of them were Latino children from 0 to 4 were left out on the uncount in 2010. And so that gives you a percentage of how this census really impacts us as Latinos and our families as well. And we were the highest, most undercounted population in the census last time it was done. And here we'll give you a percentage down by states, and you can see the different, undercounted, the nature of undetermined, and what that translates to. Texas being, the number 2 state, as you can see. The Census Bureau right now is facing challenges, because of the COVID-19. Initially, we were going to be out to be doing door-to-door and just doing some outreach, but we have changed our strategy, and right now we're hoping that a lot of our families are able to respond using the internet, but these are some challenges that you can see that we're faced with. Texas was one of the states that really did not allocate funds, to my knowledge, to be able to support outreach to around the census. We in the district were able to receive some funds from United Way, from foundations that is helping us, and then also Travis County also allocated in the city of Austin some funds to be doing some outreach. Administration last minute was attempt to around, as most of y'all have heard, the citizenship question as a way to, discourage basically some families that might be here without proper documentation. And they were trying to add this, and I bring this up because there's a lot of questions around, does the citizenship question exist still in the census? And no, it's no longer there. We were, we meaning other individuals who were also doing some outreach and political were able to remove that question. So there is no citizenship question now on the census.
Leonora, I'm wondering if you might address that. That is, I'm imagining there's still some families of English language learners. Here at MASBA, we have a special focus on Latino students and English language learners. I'm imagining that the families of many English language learners are still nervous, even though there's no citizenship question. Anything that you can say to us that we might relay to those families?
Yeah, I will be covering that. One of the messages that talk about, on how to really educate our families about how their information is, protected right now under the federal law, Chapter 13, and also the Constitution. I'll address that, but yes, the fear exists there. And, unfortunately, because of our political climate right now and that we're in, and, messaging is coming out of from the White House by the president, it is impacting our families and level of trust as far as how confidential the information is.
Mhm.
How the public will be invited, to self-respond is basically online, phone, and paper. And we realize that not all our families, have access to technology. The only technology they might have, and when I say technology, I'm talking about, a laptop, a computer, sometimes internet. A lot of them have it on their phone. And so depending on the situation, the family, we're talking, do it online or by phone. And the good thing about it is that 211 through United Way has different languages and individuals that people can call in anonymously and get instructions on how to do that. Self-respondent involves all people, anyone in a household that is living there on April 1st needs to be counted. Everyone, I received my census letter about a week ago or so, that they give us a unique number that each one can use. And they basically use that number to log in or to identify their family and how they're responding. And I know some families have had questions because it's not unknown, or in the Latino community, that we have our tios, tias, abuelos in the household. And what they're asking us is that everyone who's living there to be counted. It's in some areas here in Austin, we have situations where we might have a primary house, but behind it, there's multiple houses. And what we're suggested to our families in advisement from our census representatives is to go ahead and, those families can self-report themselves as either being, they're technically not homeless, but to call in and seek advice on how they should respond to the census, knowing that they're living in a home that by all means probably should not exist because it's not recorded in any documents within the city, but they do have a right to respond to the census as well. Here's a timeline that explains what has been happening and will continue between March 12th and 20th. Everyone has been invited. Reminder letters. If you don't respond, you will be getting a reminder letter between now and the 24th. And then a postcard will be sent. And again, also between April 8th and 16th, a reminder letter and paper questionnaire is sent. Then finally, a postcard is being sent before follow-ups in person. What we were just told this morning was that they're extending the timeline. They haven't officially sent us what that means extending. I know there was advocates because, from the people of color really wanting to say, hey, because of the COVID-19 crisis, can we put the census on hold and change the timeline? And what we were told is we can't do that because we would have to change the Constitution. And the president right now is set on us being completed with all numbers by December 31st, and he wants a report. So, we're really working with this timeline right now. 2 weeks helps, but I think the 2 weeks they're extending is more to see if U.S. Bureau is going to need to send people to be able to send individuals to their homes. This is a sample of the invitation letter everybody receives. I don't know how many of y'all have received it, but it's really basic and simple. The questionnaires, there's only 9 questions that are on the census, and it's, who lives, how many people, residents, what type, telephone, sex, age, relationship with the person, including opposite and same-sex spouses and our married partners. And that's really it. So there is no question about citizenship. You do have to answer each of these questions for each person, so it might take longer if you have a family of 6, 7, or 8, but this pretty much outlines the questions. And this is important to know because there is fraud happening. Unfortunately, we are getting information from families and other providers that people are calling pretending to be the census, and fraud trying to take people's information. And it's important that people know that we're not asking citizenship questions, immigration status, and definitely not people's social securities, numbers, and also anything around regarding people's criminal backgrounds or bank account information, employment, etc. And so it's important, but we also, our families or anyone that be listening, to remind our families that this, if someone calls and they're asking for these questions, hang up the phone. That's what we tell people, our families. 3 reasons to promote self-response. That's because it prevents from enumerators for coming out to door. Better data is less costly for the Census Bureau. Plus, this is important for our families who might be fearful because of their immigration status or other circumstances in their families that they don't want other people to know. It's really encourage them to complete it, online or by phone. And that was one of the messaging that we were giving our families. If you don't want someone to come to your house, then just do it online or by phone. There is a language assistance phone support line that is offered in English and non-English languages. As you can see, all the languages. But however, the paper form that is available is only in English and Spanish. Each language has a dedicated toll-free Census Bureau number that you can easily find on the Census.gov. And so just pointing that out so people can see. Here are all the languages, and each of those have actually a language guide and 59 non-English languages to help non-English speakers complete their forms, as you can see. And there's also a resource for American Sign Language that I have not viewed, but I've heard from our parents that it's been really helpful for them to be able to complete their census. Internet first versus internet choice. For 80% of our household, first mailing is an invitation to respond online, no paper form until 4th of mailing. April 1st was supposed to be Census Day, and it still is. April 1st is still considered the big push to push out information regarding the census, and we will be doing a huge media campaign as well, and digitally and internet, and also using videos that are being produced here locally. But you can also find videos as well on the census website that will help. We realize that some of our families' coverage is very limited. We're discovering with some of our rural counties that if they do have internet or using hotspots, Wi-Fi hotspots, that sometimes it's hard to connect. So calling in would be the better option for them. Here are the dates of non-responses, July 13th to July 31st. And as I mentioned, that changed changed 2 weeks later. Still waiting to see, get some guidance from the government, U.S. government, what will be happening. And census takers will use mobile devices. They leave a notice of visit on your door. And they will make up to six attempts at each time, and only the questions that are in the questionnaire, and no one should be asking for documents to prove who is in the household of any of our families. If censors do visit your home or the home of your neighbors, landlords, or proxies, they will never ask to enter your home. That's important for our families to know. They will identify themselves, and they will be wearing a U.S. Census Bureau badge, and only ask questions about the 9 questions I showed you earlier. No citizenship or immigration or financial information, and they will never ask for a request for additional documents. This is really important for our families to be aware of, is that they will be wearing a valid ID badge with a photograph of the U.S. Department watermark emblem on them and an expiration date on them. And because that came up with some of the trainings we were doing, some of our parents were saying, well, how do we know it's them? and the representatives from the U.S. government said they will all be having a census badge, and you'll see that it does have an expiration date of July 2nd, 2019. Well, that's a no one, 2019. In this case, it will be, say 2020, July 31st. There is a phone number that individuals can also call if someone comes to their homes or if they're concerned about what their encounter they had with someone that they're encouraged to call that number. The summary of the key dates, you can see household continue to respond, primary non-responses, National Census Day. To your earlier question, Dr. Matthias, about the question around confidentiality, and here, it's some education and all our materials that we're putting out, the majority of them, they have this on them saying that under Title 13 of the U.S. Code, the census cannot, be shared with anyone. Even with I'll give you an example, like for our parent support specialists or AISD staff, anyone that is doing some volunteer work and trying to educate our families, we are telling them that we cannot share this information with anyone, and that we're not helping people complete the census, but we're educating them to the census, and that the Census Bureau will have access to their personal information, and that this is protected, and are subject to, $250,000 fine or up to 5 years in prison. And you can get more information here as where you visit this website. I wanted to go back to counting the very young children. For us as Latinos, this is the most undercounted group that we have. Even babies born on or before April 1st should be counted at homes. It's really important that we, in any messaging that we do, it is really stressed to our families that they also count their children in the census, not them just as adults, because really the census, if you think about it, if it's a child is 5 or 10 right now, the next 10 years, they will be an adult, and between that time, you're talking about their whole education years that they will be for accessing healthcare or accessing a lot of programs that might support their education. What messages work? Here is, stand up, we count it, we live here, we count here. We're using the tagline, everyone counts, both with families, and really stressing you don't have to be a citizen to participate regardless of your race, age, immigration status. And here's really remember, any information you share with the form cannot be shared with any other agency. It's important for us to participate as communities so we can make sure tax dollars are working for us. And that's something, with our Latino community is that they do pay taxes, but we need to remind them that there's different ways, their taxes, this is one way their tax funds are being used is to support the education of their children. Quick summary, recent research shows that a significant percentage of Latinos still, citizens. I think that there is still a question around citizenship question on the form, and that is and participants really wanted to hear from trusted voices. I think members of our trusted voices, in our schools, the schools are trusted voices, our faith-based community are trusted voices, and other, teachers as well. So we're looking at how we basically separate from, I don't want to get political, but the thoughts of the Census Bureau and also what is coming out of the, Trump administration, and also, looking at different messaging. Some Spanish dominant immigrants want support filling out their forms, and unfortunately, we're not allowed to, fill out the forms by law. The law says very clearly that we cannot fill out the forms for any of our families. They have to fill it out themselves. We can guide them through the process, and we can also read it to them, but they themselves who actually have to fill it out. And one of the things we notice is the race question sometimes is confusion and meaning the blank, but it's important that they be aware to select something in regards to the race. Consider linking to the U.S. government website. We have been working real closely with NADEO, which is the National Latino Education Organization. They actually came out and did a training. They trained about close to 200 of our parents and volunteers and partners to help us get the word out. We're fixing to do a phone bank, and we're partnering also with the Austin Council of PTAs to help us get the word out, because those are another group of trusted individuals on campuses. We're going to do some newsletters. Right now with the schools being closed, we are still looking at different strategies that we can still communicate with our families. And anyone who works in any of the buildings where they can have videos, or even through their websites, we strongly recommend that be done. We're going to be working with our food service and already working with the Capital Area Food Bank, where families are coming to get food, and how can we also include some information. One thing that we did that is being successful with our Title I schools is we actually purchased some banners and had our school put up the census banners, encouraging families to complete it. And we're seeing some traction with that, because families see it when they're driving by to either pick up at that time picking up their students, but now picking up their food at other food sites. Informing, assisting, and promoting. It's gone over those states already. Additional resources that I mentioned. The business NADEO has, from my perspective, the best information in English and Spanish, and they're doing some amazing work right now getting out the word out about the census. Their websites are here. You can download different presentations that are available to any of us, and to be able to modify for those of us who are educators and want to are doing some distant learning right now because of if their schools are closed. There's a whole web area where educators can actually do classes around the census with their students and maybe even their families, that they can talk about why it's so important. I would encourage all educators to visit that site, and all of these resources are free. And there's also some other educational association resources. There are statistics in schools, the ones I was mentioning, that can be used. And the good thing about it, that these are already in Spanish, and they're also in English and has different messaging. There's some coloring books that you can order as well, that if you decided to give out some materials, or you're able to give out homework packets, if you are a representative from a school district or a nonprofit, that are also available to you. And here's some, you can download presentations. Some of this, we are modifying as we're moving, considering now for us here in Austin, the executive order around, stay sheltered. And if there's some resources also for elected officials and school board members. I know some of you are school board members, and here's an example of different resolutions to support the census. And that would be great for a district, to be looking at and doing some resolutions to try to really get the messaging out to the parents and their partners, how important it is, and that it's going to take all of us. To me, the title, The Visible Ones, if you see it there, how Latino children are left out, is very powerful to read and see, and I think that this is one of the opportunities where the largest growing population here in Texas, is if this is an opportunity for us not to be invisible no more. And so any help that we could get from y'all, whoever is listening to this right now or in the future, to really read that material and then do some of this recommended outreach and educating families and really getting the messaging out to how important it is. It's going to really impact us for the next 2 years in different, not only politically, but also impact and strengthen us around resources for future leaders. Here are some more, here's a bilingual census information hotline, that anyone can use and get some more questions. It's confidential and it's safe. And of course, our digital assets that we have, always Facebook, Twitter. One of the apps that I heard that our families like to use, I'm trying to get familiar with it. It's the WhatsApp. And so it sounds like a lot of our families use that. We did a study here in the district, and we found that a lot of our Latino families or English language learner families like to communicate using Facebook. So we're going to also be using Facebook as a way to promote the census with them. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you found it helpful and enlightening.
Tremendous. Leonor, really appreciate your time. I have to say, I was very surprised at how simple it was to respond to the census, actually. So I'm a genealogist. I've seen, some historical documents that seem quite complex, asking for people's occupations and educational levels and all sorts of information. And I tell you, in this household, we really flashed through that, the census. Any thoughts on how easy and or not so easy it is for many of the families that we serve, especially for the families of our English language learners? Are they finding it more difficult or not necessarily?
There's some factors that are contributing of how easy it is for families or not. I mean, as you know, we're very diverse, and a lot of it depends on, if the family is able to read. Those are the families that I know we've heard and have reached out to our parent support specialists for help, because they do want to complete it. So that is, a group of, individuals that are really struggling in completing it. And then there's individuals, the language is so simple that they do find it easy to complete. And where it becomes time consuming is if you are a large family, because you do have to respond for every member in your family. But for the most part, we've heard really positive information as feedback from our families that they like responding by phone rather than on the computer, because it's much easier. And right now, with families being at home and children being at home and just the other stressors they're faced with, the phone is really easy for them to do it.
Tremendous. And Leonor, if I understood you correctly then, so for those of us who are aware that we are sliding into the pandemic of COVID-19 here in Texas, what we're understanding from you is that there's no considerable delay or impact on the census. That is to say that we will be doing a US Census amid all of the action of the coming days and months?
That is correct. Yes, the only thing we've heard is that there's been an extension only of when they will come out to your homes of 2 weeks. But as far as the deadline for completing it still stands, and when we have to, the report has to be submitted to the president is still December 31st.
Tremendous. Leonor, we have some questions that are coming in that we want to address as well. A question from Lee Crenshaw is whether we as districts can invite families to come to school on a designated day and time to have someone help them to do the census, say, online. What possibilities exist? It's both, say, in cities like Austin that are now in shelter-in-place scenarios, but in places in Texas where that's not the case. Any word on what schools districts are doing, and is it possible for school districts to invite families to come to the schools on designated days and times for assistance in filling out the census?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were going to be doing here in Austin, but we had to change our strategy, is that we were actually going to set up computers, because most of our parent support specialists have a room and computers accessible to them and that families could come in, was to designate some times and days where families could come in and try to complete their census online. As I stated earlier, we can only provide the resources and read the questions to them. We can't actually fill it to them. I think that that's a great strategy to be able to address any questions that families would have. As always, in person, as we know, is better sometimes than over the phone. But if you're able to do that, that would be great. I would also suggest that each county has a designated U.S. Census representative is to find out who your representative is. Because what we had done here in the district was we were inviting census workers who could actually take the census and assist our families in a different level to attend our events. So for instance, if you're wanting to do, if you're still having events and you're wanting to have a big like census day in your school, find out who that representative is, and they were willing to send enumerators to our school events to help us with that, and that really removed the liability from the school district or any of your staff.
Tremendous. And so, Leonard, so that I am clear, and this is a part of Lee's follow-up question. So I am not able to input the data for another family then. My challenge becomes, how do I help that family to respond to the census on their own?
For that family, what I would suggest is that they call in.
Ah, okay.
I would suggest, if they don't have a phone or they do have a phone, but with limited numbers, is create the space not only with computers, but also maybe for them to come in and use a phone at the school. And, sometimes their families need that additional support just to have someone there with them. Allow them to use your school phone or staff phone.
Got it. So that is, I didn't know that was an option for families wishing to respond, that they can respond by phone as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then let's see, Israel Carrera from Waco ISD is asking, Leonor, would a person like yourself be willing to share a PowerPoint like this for us to be able to use it as a resource in our districts?
Yes, the PowerPoint I have, y'all are welcome to use it. It's like I said, this is a work that has been created from Naleo and also created from input from United Way and myself and other committees. And I think it's the more people that get the word out, that would be great. I don't have it in Spanish, but I would strongly, if you're depending who your audience is, you can translate it.
Tremendous. Appreciate your willingness to do that, Leonor. I know that'll be a big help. Appreciate too your shout out for our friends at NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. NALEO has two websites that you pointed out, Leonor, and I just want to mention them again for all of our friends on the line. Those websites in English are countallkids.org and in Spanish, hazmecontar.org. Anything that you might say about either or both of those websites, Leonor?
They're amazing. I would encourage anyone to use them, and also use the Census.gov websites, because there are some videos there that are really to the point in English and Spanish that you could just create links to on your Twitters or Facebook, or even put them up on your school websites, and encourage families to see the videos, because I think videos are always engaging.
Tremendous. I think we're almost winding down here, Leonor. Really appreciate your drawing our attention to possible scams around the census. Personally, I had not even thought of that, how it is that persons might be taking advantage of this time of the US Census to be able to knock on people's doors or to call people up and say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of the US Census Bureau and I'm looking for your social security number or some other information that's not asked in the census. So really appreciate you're raising our attention to possible scams as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it is happening. We heard of some families that happened to, and there's multiple perspectives, and unfortunately, there's some hate that is being perpetuated towards our families, and I'll just leave it at that for us to be mindful of that is happening.
So, Leonora, I think the last question that I have here is, any last words you'd like to share with us? As districts, many of us right now are very preoccupied with the COVID-19 pandemic that is just entering many of our communities. I was on a conference call with 15 school board members from throughout the state of Texas giving updates on COVID-19 in their districts. That is top of mind. I hate to say this, but the US Census is sort of being eclipsed right now by concerns of COVID-19. Right now, we have on the line various school board members and superintendents and district administrators. Anything you might say to us about managing the US Census and the need to respond to this, especially in light of the pandemic into which we're quickly sliding?
Yeah, that's, it is, it's hard, we as a social worker, really, looking at being mindful that right now in the minds of all our families, right now is basic needs, their health and financial needs. And, there's a deep compassion right now that I sense for our families. But I also know that as educators, I have a responsibility to inform our families like I know this is all happening and don't want to be insensitive. However, if you're seeing in the news that when they're talking about federal funds being distributed, the data they're using to distribute those funds is from the census.
Wow.
And they look at the number of families by state, by county, etc., by city, and more, it's like stressing to our families. We don't want to be insensitive, but one way you could help us, I even heard someone mentioning that they're using even the data that's coming in already of response rates regarding the census in certain areas in the United States. I know we are planning to craft a letter that we're to our families around that and saying, turn it into a learning opportunity. There is that website, Statistics in Schools and around the census, and really promoting learning at home. This could be an activity they could do with their entire family, in the time they turn off the TV, not to listen about census anymore.
I love it. This could almost be a civics lesson then for families who are looking for ideas for what to do with the kids. A civics lesson. Let's fill out this census together.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And
Wow.
it really, yeah, and it's really shows, I think that, really creates a sense from my perspective of hope, and really, educating our children. I just had a conversation with my son about this, about our census, and, really saying, this is really important, because, and, where will you be in 10 years? What will be your needs? And this is why we're responding to the census as a family, because you will be a grown adult and it will be impacting grandchildren. If he doesn't have children right now, but
So there are all sorts of lessons that we could learn, and I like the idea of parents and grandparents being helped by their students to be able to fill this out. We filled it out in my household online. There's something very beautiful about parents and grandparents asking, well, how do we respond on certain questions? The race question I found very intriguing with all the categories there. I have a feeling that our young people could be a light and a guide through all of this for others.
Yes, we'll be through via our connections with the Austin Council of PTAs. We'll be using our PTAs also to do some outreach, and then trying to figure out how to reconnect, since our schools are closed right now, with our students, our juniors and seniors who are savvy with social media to help us also get the messaging out.
Tremendous. Leonor, thank you for your time with us. Any final words here as we begin to wrap up?
I want to thank everyone who is listening right now. And I know we're being challenged in many ways as professionals and also as individuals. But gracias por todo that you are doing and continue to do for our students and families around the state, and sending everyone some healing energy and amor y paz.
Thank you, Leonor Vargas of the Austin ISD. I'll follow up you, Leonor, to see how it is that we can make your PowerPoint available then. Let's see how it is that we can get our families counted. We have various resources, including the website of the U.S. Census. We have those websites of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. Those websites are countallkids.org and hazmecontar.org. That's HAZMECONTAR, hazmecontar.org. Thank you, Leonor, for all of these resources. For all of us who are listening, our next webinar then will be next Thursday, April the 2nd at noon Central Date Time. Patricia Nunez will be speaking with us on moving from visualizing to realizing the strengths of developing bilinguals. Here at MASBA, we have a special focus on closing gaps in our Texas public schools, particularly for the Latinx students who comprise the majority of our Texas public schools, but also for our English language learners who are expected to be 25% of our Texas public schools by 2025. So that'll be next Thursday, April the 2nd at noon Central Date Time, moving from visualizing to realizing the strengths of developing bilinguals. Just want to take a moment to be able to thank you all for your support of MASBA, the Mexican American School Boards Association. We are excited to be celebrating 50 years of closing gaps in our Texas public schools this year. We look forward to getting through this COVID-19 pandemic together and celebrating. We have various events that are planned in June and September of this year in San Antonio and in Dallas. So prayers for all who are affected by this pandemic. We will get through this together. Best wishes to all of us and to our districts as we navigate these largely uncharted waters. And appreciate your tuning in for this time of talking about the U.S. Census. Join us next week then for visualizing and realizing the strengths of developing bilinguals. Have a great day, y'all. Que pasen buenas tardes.